don't number 1, no repetition, paraphrase, or, okay, summary. All right, so no summarization, no paraphrasing, and no repeating, which already makes it sounds very difficult. And it's supposed to be in that way because analytical essay isn't something that's easy, and it doesn't need any prerequisite or threshold of understanding. It does need to be built on a very effective reading experience, first of all. So you have to actually read through the passage and understand where are the potential spots for me to go ahead and make my interpretation first, and then you can focus on these things. So later on, right, we're gonna summarize something related to the steps of making interpretations. So interpretations don't just come out of nowhere, but there is going to be a gradual step that's sense making and reasonable for people to follow, and we'll see how this has become generated and possible to be probed out through our own reading experiences, and how and where usually it becomes hidden, okay, or situated into the passage. So that being said, no repetition, no paraphrase, no summary, number 1. Okay, and let's say don'ts or reminders. Okay, and we also have to be reminded that we need to stay passage only, which there's a very interesting thing that I'm going to go ahead and kind of paraphrase from my memory. It might not be word for word the same, but this is what I have seen in people's practice, like the handed in versions of what the interpretations can be. So there was one particular piece of evidence in the passage that says that the field work is, or the areas of where the LiDAR is able to cover is a lot larger than the traditional field work. That is the piece of evidence. And I'm gonna go ahead and paraphrase the interpretation as I remembered. I'm gonna ask everybody if this will count as interpretation and why or why not. So I'm gonna write it down actually on the board so that it's easier for everybody to track and see and compare the information. And then we're gonna practice. All right, and I want justifications from people of whether you believe, yes, this counts, okay, as a particular piece of interpretation, or no, actually doesn't. And I will want to probe out a reason from everybody as well. So the evidence, okay, is that this LiDAR, okay, covers more areas than traditional, okay, field work can ever, right, achieve. And I believe it was, one particular day. So this is what that was, right? I'm gonna just squeeze it here. 1 second. Okay, so LiDAR covers more areas than traditional fieldwork can ever achieve. And then here's the interpretation, everybody. Interpretation comes into something like this. There is, well, first of all, hard work, or let's say it's a hard job going into the field, all right, and do the work, because manpower is usually less effective than machine, and therefore it requires, right, courage and tenacity to endure the hard work. All right, so that's what I remembered, which I personally enjoyed reading the whole thing. Okay, so let me just kind of go ahead, right, and review everything with everybody together. The evidence is LiDAR covers more areas than traditional fieldwork can ever achieve in one day, right? And the interpretation is that it's a very difficult job to go into the field, well, due to the reasons that we have already listed on the board. All right, some time for everybody to pause and think, and I would like some volunteers, right, in this case, to try and share a little bit of your opinion so far. Do you think this mock interpretation count as an interpretation, or is it more of like a distorted or not really of an interpretation? Oh, Ellen's had a hand up. Go ahead. Nice.
It is, because I think interpretation also means like it's an explanation of of something because so this is an explanation of why lidar covers more area than traditional field work.
Okay, so in this case, Ellen believes yes, it does count as a particular piece of interpretation. I specifically picked this one because it's tricky to decide, or it's actually a bit more challenging for us to identify whether or not it actually counts as something that we
Actually, no.
Okay, Ellen, why not? Changing.
Yeah, I just saw the last couple words. It says can never achieve. So it's kind of the same as requires courage and tendency to endure the hard work.
Okay, everybody. So, well, that in this case, right, it kind of reminds us about what is the definition of interpretation. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and ask Rita to break down for us. What is the expectation that we have before set for interpretation? What does it need to be? Instead of repeating, instead of paraphrasing, instead of summarizing, we need to. Yes, Rita, and you're muted so far.
Kind of to like to give further understanding and predict what the author is actually trying to say.
Very good. Okay, so this is an in-depth probe in terms of the underlying messages that are there. But underlying means what? Right, as we said before, everybody, I'm going to put this down here and ask everybody the same question again. Does this count as a particular piece of interpretation based on the evidence that we have already laid out on the board? So we previously said, right, the expectation for your particular, right, interpretation is that it's going to be, right, let's say every piece of interpretation must find its quote unquote roots back in the original text. Okay, in either, everybody, this is more of like a definition, which I want everybody to copy down as well, in either explicit or implicit way. But what does that mean, right? So I'm going to underline some of those important things right here. Number one, every piece of it must find its roots, okay, back in the original text in either explicit or implicit way. So explicit, as people might know, it means obvious, okay, like literally saying so or literally stated in that way. That's what explicit means. And implicit means less obvious, usually speaking hidden. Yet either implicit or explicit, it has to be there. With me so far, everyone? So with explicit, what we refer to is that it's very straightforward and it's probably literally, right, stated so. But implicit is going to be less obvious, but it's going to leave you with some hints. Right? And with the hints, this is where you find its root. So we never make our own topics, or we never just write something that I thought it means this. But if you don't find in-text support, it doesn't count. Are we following so far, everyone? Okay, if there's no in-text support, in whatever way, in either like if it's directly saying so or if it's indirectly saying so, but you need to find out at least a particular part, even if it's leaving hints for this to be interpreted in this way, your interpretation is valid. But if throughout the passage there's nowhere, like literally nowhere in the text that's even talking about this, we do not make assumptions. Are we following so far? Because our assumptions or our comments or our feedback do not count as interpretations because they're not passage only anymore. I'm bringing something new. Does that make sense, everyone?